here as we go through this, but I think we'll get started. First of all, I wanted to say thank you for those of you who are attending our Zoom meeting today. We had one yesterday, was our first Zoom public forum relating to the wildlife damage management program for game fish and parks. I'm Arden Peterson. I'm a special assistant to Secretary Hepler, and I'll be the facilitator of today's meeting. We've used Zoom for some internal meetings, commission meetings, and now for a couple external meetings with constituents. We sure understand that virtual meetings don't replace face-to-face meetings, but they have been proven to be somewhat useful for us during this pandemic we're in. Hopefully we'll be back to in-person meetings before too long because we think that they're more productive, but we'll continue with this in the meantime. I ask your patience today as we navigate through this call. We're still learning how to best conduct these meetings, and your input is valuable for us. The intent of today's forum is to provide a platform for producers and other interested folks to share their thoughts and ideas with us. This is a listening session, and we'd like to hear from each of you who have participated in our wildlife damage management program in the past, or even if you haven't. Your input will help us shape the goals and objectives of the program, as well as provide us with information that will assist in developing or refining ways to measure our customer service. Now for a few housekeeping items for today's meeting. For those of you who are connected through the computer, there'll be a chat feature that Emily Keel, our department senior advisor, will be monitoring. I believe Emily will post some questions on the chat as well, so if you're so inclined, you can answer through that feature. If you want to answer a question or share a comment orally, there should be a toolbar at the bottom of your screen that should allow you to raise your hand. If you can't locate the raise your hand feature, or if you're on your phone, we'd still like to hear from you, so please join in. Everyone will be on mute when you come into the meeting, so you'll need to unmute for us to hear you. I'll try my best to make sure that everybody who wants to ask a question or provide a comment has that opportunity. If you're on your phone, you may have to hit *6 to unmute. I was able to unmute mine this morning without hitting the *6, but evidently that works for some. So try that if you're having trouble getting through. In addition, today's meeting is being recorded and will be available on our website. Emily, did I miss anything? Is there anything to add?
I think you got it, Arden.
Okay, thank you, Emily. Now I'd like to introduce Deputy Secretary Kevin Roebling and turn the floor over to Kevin for a few words.
Yeah, thanks, Arden. Thanks to the folks in the phone today. Getting a little bit of an echo here. I'll set that over there a little further. Anyway, just want to say thank you for participating in today's call. This is our second call, as I mentioned. I know it's a busy time of year for everybody with haying season and everything else going on, so we sure appreciate the time out of your day to join us. A couple things, two main goals of this program. Provide excellent customer service, that's number one. This is a producer-focused, producer-driven program, and providing excellent customer service is front and center. The second major goal of this program is to mitigate livestock loss and wildlife damage. And at the end of the day, we want to hear from you as to if this program is living up to those expectations of mitigating livestock loss and reducing wildlife damage. And again, this is a listening session. We're eager to hear what's working, what's not, and ultimately trying to find ways that we can measure success or even failure of the program moving forward into the future. So excited to hear some thoughts, excited to hear what we can do to improve. We're always looking to improve. We're always looking to provide, better, excellent customer service. And that's the mission and the goal of the department. So with that, I don't want to take up too much time with the introduction, but again, thank you. Thank you for all you do as producers in this state. And we surely appreciate and are just excited to work with you in the future and provide those services that you do need out there. So with that, Arden, I'll turn it back to you.
Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate those words. And Kevin's been a huge supporter of our wildlife damage management program, and your leadership, Kevin, in this program has been very, very valuable for us and for producers. Emily, could you put up the first slide now? Thank you, Emily. Some folks here on the call may wonder why you're here today. First of all, we want to have open communication. We want to hear from our producers and other folks about what wildlife damage management services you've used in the past and what was the outcome. We'd like to have you help us determine our program goals. How can we, as a department, modify our current programs and services to better meet the needs of landowners and producers? What services are working well and what areas, excuse me, could use improvement? A little tickle, excuse me. And also help our department determine success of our wildlife damage management program. How would you describe satisfaction and what would need to happen for you to consider yourself satisfied with wildlife damage? I think he's up on the chat as well, but I wanted to kind of set the stage a little bit for what we're going to talk about here today. And this slide will come up again after Keith Fisk's talk, but for right now, I'll ask Keith Fisk. He's our Department of Wildlife Damage Management Program Administrator, and I'll ask him to provide a brief overview of our programs with a focus on Central South Dakota. If you have any questions during the slides, Keith will pause for a minute at the end of each slide for you to ask those questions. So, Emily, if you go to the next slide, and Keith, you're on.
Thanks, Arden, and thanks for everyone's time today. Certainly appreciate everyone's time. Getting some background noise. Can you hear me now?
Sounds good, Keith.
Yeah, so I've got about 3 or 4 slides I'll just run through to kind of give everyone a brief overview of our program, and then, of course, answer any questions, and then kick it back to Arden. Our wildlife damage management program here in South Dakota really is a comprehensive program where our agency provides services and programs directly to producers and landowners, and it runs the full gamut, everything from coyotes to deer to elk to Canada geese to prairie dog. If it's a wildlife species here in South Dakota, for the most part, we'll work with producers to address those wildlife damage concerns. And as Kevin started to talk about earlier on here, several goals of our program currently are to mitigate wildlife damage and livestock loss, and then really maintain positive relationships with landowners. As folks on the phone and on the call today know that the preponderance of South Dakota is privately owned, 80 to 85%, and it's imperative for our agency to be able to successfully meet our goals of wildlife management, and also having places and opportunities for hunters to be able to enjoy wildlife resources. It really is important and imperative for our agency to have those positive relationships with private landowners here in South Dakota. Our program, currently we have 28 full-time employees scattered across the state that provide this service and programs directly to producers. And again, it's driven by the producers. And it's driven on a request basis. So producers contact our staff, and then we, of course, go out and assess the situation and work with those producers to resolve those types of issues. Currently, we operate off of around a $3.5 million budget on an annual basis. And our revenue sources for these programs primarily come from hunting license sales through the form of surcharge on hunting licenses, license fees in generals. There's a non-refundable application fee on several different species. We do receive a small portion of the funding from our counties, every county in South Dakota. And then on an annual basis, we also have an appropriation through the South Dakota Department of Agriculture to help us fund this program. With that, any questions here on what I covered before we move to the next slide? Hearing none, Emily, next slide, please. So today I wanted to focus here in Central South Dakota with most of the services that landowners and producers request here in the central part of the state. And obviously predator control is the largest component of our program across the state as well as in Central South Dakota. Our agency really focuses on a lot of the ground techniques, so a lot of the trapping, the snaring, calling, utilizing M44s or sodium cyanide devices. And then we also work closely with USDA Wildlife Services for aerial predator control efforts. And we also, in some areas of the state, rely on cooperative efforts with local predator control districts. Another important component of our program across the state, as well as in central South Dakota, is deer depredation. So if you think about severe winter times here in South Dakota, where we have a lot of snow and cold temperatures, a lot of areas deer will travel a great distance to find shelter and feed, and oftentimes those two requirements end up being in ranch yards or farm yards where there may be stored livestock feeds intended for producing livestock, but unfortunately mule deer and white-tailed deer can get into those stored feed supplies and cause significant damage. To mitigate that damage, our agency works closely with landowners and producers to implement protective fencing or panel contracts up to $10,000 to individuals to protect those stored livestock feeds. And then we also rely a lot on hazing techniques, whether that's with our own staff or utilizing depredation hunts to remove some of those animals in the immediate area, but more importantly, push those animals off. And in some situations, we'll set up intercept feeding locations where we can have those critters utilize some hay outside of the producer's farmyard to mitigate those losses. And then also here in central South Dakota, we do a small portion of work with prairie dog control, where we have prairie dogs encroaching on the private property from adjacent public land. And in that situation, our agency will come in and work directly with the producer and provide direct control or poisoning to be able to take care of those critters so they don't impact those livestock operations. Any questions with that? Hearing none, next slide, please, Emily. I also briefly wanted to touch base here a little bit on several of the program changes we made here recently in 2020. As many folks know, our agency went through an external review from a private company here this past year. And at the conclusion of that review, our agency put together an action plan, and within that action plan, had several different changes. Some of those changes were immediate. Other changes are going to take several months to complete. And one of those was to host public forums and solicit information directly from producers to help us move forward with our program. So here we are several months later. So this is one of those things that takes a little bit longer to get completed. Some of those immediate program changes that I wanted to share with folks today really focused around enhanced levels of predator control efforts here in South Dakota. And I've got 4 or 5 of those highlighted, but our agency provided 300 additional hours, of aerial predator control on top of the approximately 1,000 to 1,200 hours that's provided on an annual basis already. We also added 2 additional FTEs, or full-time employees. One of those individuals will be a field staff member, which will be placed in western South Dakota. The other one is a program manager or a direct or immediate supervisor of those field employees stationed in western South Dakota. We also reprioritized our staff's workloads so that there was a clear focus with predator removal activities during that critical time of the year when producers are calving or lambing, so that February through June period. Along with that, we had a pre-approved overtime package to increase the flexibility a staff had to be able to meet those demands from producers and provide those services. We also purchased around $150,000 worth of thermal rifle scopes and equipment. A lot of that technology has changed here in the last few years. Still comes with a significant price tag, but it has really greatly increased the efficiency of our staff to be able to tackle some of those challenging issues at night, obviously, but with some new tools and techniques above and beyond what we've traditionally been able to use. The last component of one of the changes that we're still implementing here in 2020 is we are going to introduce a formal training program. So any staff that come on new to our agency, or even existing staff that may need some additional training in some certain areas, we'll be able to have a formal training process to be able to give both of those types of employees the training that's needed in more of a formal setting than perhaps we've provided in the past. I believe that's my last slide, but I'd be happy to take any questions on this slide. Yeah, any questions? Hearing none, Arden, I guess kick it back to you if you want to try to facilitate here the next sessions. That'd be awesome.
Thank you, Keith. A good presentation. Sometimes it takes just a little while for folks to get unmuted and whatnot. So if there are any other questions for Keith as it pertains to his overview of the wildlife damage management program, I'd take those now. Seeing none, Emily, can you put up that slide, the next slide? Okay, we're back to this slide that I showed earlier that Emily put up. And once again, why you're here today and why you're participating on this call is that, first of all, we want to hear from you. We'd like to hear from our producers. And if anybody out here could share some of their experience working on working with our staff or has had wildlife damage in the past, whether it be predator damage or something from deer or prairie dogs or anything else, we would sure like to hear from you. And if you could share a little bit of the story or your experience and what the outcome was. I'll throw that out there for input from folks out there on the call right now. Clayton, I know you were on yesterday and had a little difficulty with the audio, but I don't know if there's anything that you would like to share today with the group on the call.
Looking through the different questions and bullet points on this particular slide, in the document that I had provided you guys this morning, as far as the only thing I can see is when we're talking about that satisfaction, that was kind of an area I had touched on. And if there's any producers in here that are current producers in the state of South Dakota, if we can get their comments on that as far as what exactly they're looking for satisfaction. Like I said, satisfaction in the predator area, is it the correlation of the more fur that's on the ground? Is that what they're looking for, satisfaction? Coyotes, if you pressure them, they're still going to come back. They're not going to be like deer or elk in that aspect. So that was kind of the big thing yesterday I wanted to touch on. What exactly is a producer looking for, and is the game fish and parks open and willing to listen to what the ranchers want, rather than game fish and parks coming in and saying, hey, this is what we're going to do. That's kind of the only thing I had on that.
Thank you, Clayton. Does anybody else on the call have any comments in regards to that?
Say Clayton, Kevin here, and I truly do appreciate you sending in those comments this morning. That was very, very much appreciated. And like I responded back, we are going to keep those front and center, and I couldn't agree with you more. And to answer your question, yes, we are able and willing to look outside the box on some of these things, and we want to ensure that this program is producer driven because it's producer focused, and that's really what it comes down to. So that's the direction. We have been going in the past, but we're going to definitely be going there in the future. And yeah, anything that is out there that you have suggestions to improve upon, we're going to be all ears and head that way. So that's one of the other pieces of this, is that measuring success piece, and satisfaction is obviously a part of that.
Any other comments from anybody on the call?
Kevin, this is John Harder from Winter, South Dakota area. Or
Go ahead, John.
Arden, I guess. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. Go ahead, John.
So down here, I live just southwest of Winter, and we see, I think, what looks to me to be a pretty heavy deer population down in this area. We had one run out of the ditch and run into my wife's Tahoe just a few weeks ago, and we were only going 20 mile an hour because she was behind me and I was behind another tractor. So, you know, between that and a little bit of, I think there's a little bit of coyote problem down in this area too. So, you know, I guess in my view, I think maybe the licensing might be a bit of a problem, that maybe we're not hitting them hard enough. You know, a few years ago, we were having them die so bad from the brain wasting, and whether overpopulation is a part of that, I don't know all the science behind it, but we sure have a lot of deer hits down here in Tripp County. I know that. And you know, it's talking about the depredation, I guess, too, but you know, and there's a lot of crop damage too, but you know, most of the people in the area that aren't in the ag community, they don't necessarily notice that like we do out here. But I think that's a partial issue too, that we never get paid on as producers, you know. So I just wanted to let you know that I think we got a pretty heavy population down here.
Thank you, John. I think that's really, really important for, you know, you to share with us. Have you had some damage on your property, and as the department came out and helped with anything on your property in the past?
Well, you know, I applied and got some of the deer panels for protecting my silage piles and corn piles. So I would say that, you know, that's the extent of what I've received through the game fishing parks. So, but
Okay.
you know, I don't do it. You know, it's not a every year process. You know, sometimes you see them coming in every night to your silage pile, but you know, you just take it with a grain of salt most of the time.
Were the panels effective for you then?
Yes, they work very well. Mostly my concern was, you know, if I got the silage pile squared off, most of the time they don't mess with it too much. They eat off the edges. But yeah, for as far as my ground corn that I have on the ground, they work real well for that. That's a great program, and I appreciate you guys giving back to us on that.
Say, John, just a question for you. Are you enrolled in our permanent stackyard program, or is that just all portable panels?
Mine are just portable panels.
Okay, we do offer a permanent stackyard contract, and we pay to build that thing, and for the materials for it at least, and even some labor in some situations. So might be something we can reach back out to you on if you're interested. We'd be glad to work with you on that.
Now, is that above the what was a limit on the like the panel program? I know you could have, I think it was it two $5,000 or $4,000-$5,000?
Yeah, that is correct. Yep. And Keith, if you want to elaborate on that a little bit, our permanent stackyard and then our portable panel program, if you want to just talk about that a little bit, that'd be great.
Yeah, John, I was just going to mention that, you know, we'll do a one-time contract for the panels, and that's up to $10,000 worth of those. And then the stackyards, the permanent stackyards or protective fencing that Kevin's talking about, I mean, we'll provide up to $10,000 worth of cost share assistance to buy that big high fence around something. If you store your feed in the same spot every year, and you know that fencing is an option that works for you, but we'll work with producers, you know, multiple years to be able to get something permanent that works for individual situations. And again, you know, a lot of times guys maybe move their feet around, or you know, for one reason or another, they like the panels, which are really popular within our agency, probably more so than the protective panel or protective fencing. But we can certainly have staff reach back out to you if we need to be able to come down and make a site visit and see what works best for your operation.
Well, I'll keep that in mind for right now. I think I'm okay. Where I'd have to fence in, we'd have to put that woven wire up along the road, and I think that would just create a big snowdrift area for the county road. So I think it would create as much of a problem as we'd be trying to fix. But
Yeah.
I appreciate the offer, and if something changes, I'll get a hold of you.
John, if you would like, we can take your phone number too, and Mark Olm is on the call as well, and he could make sure that we have somebody stop by and visit with you at your convenience and see if there's something that we can help with.
Sure. 605-840-9478.
Okay, thanks, John. Mark, you have anything? You're on the call yet, aren't you, Mark? You have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I'm still here. Thanks, Arden. And John, thank you. We'll have somebody in touch with you there. I know my regional manager for that program is on the line too, so he's probably got your number already. And we'll get somebody down there to take a look at what you got going on. So thank you.
All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate you doing this.
You bet.
Say, John, I had a question, I guess, for you while we got you on the line. I mean, as far as getting to know what programs we do offer, how did you find out we do offer, that portable stack yard or that portable panel program? Is there better ways for the department to interact with producers? What lines of communication should we be using that we don't use? Is there any advice there for the department?
Well, I don't know if you put it out on your online or not within your emails. I think that's probably a good way. Depends on how many people actually click on to let you send them emails. I've had been on your email list for quite a number of years now, I think, but I think that's a good way. If you guys are carrying a Facebook page, I think that would probably be another good way. I believe it's been a while, but I think my first one I found by word of mouth from a neighbor is how I found out about it.
No, those are great suggestions, and yeah, that's always one of our challenges is awareness of the programs we do offer to our producers. So,
some of the guys out there, and I think this is they still have, but they take in hunters. So that's probably, I think, where you're getting you may not be getting to some producers is because of the disqualification that if you do paid hunting that you don't help those people out. And I guess I can see your reasoning, but I think that's maybe not a fair appropriation of why you're disqualifying them for being in the program, because they're producing out here, and you guys all, I'm sure, are aware of that. Our ag situation right now is about as dismal as it's been for a number of years. So protecting everything that we get for our crop is pretty important right now, whether it be cattle or grain or whatever.
yeah, absolutely. No, that's a great point. And we do have conversations about that piece quite often. We actually are meeting with the preserve operators again here mid-August, the pheasant preserve operators, and that has come up already once, and I suspect that conversation will come up again because of the points you just made as well. So no, that's a great point, and we definitely will continue discussing those rules that are in place and see where that leads us. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and just one last point, and it doesn't really but if somebody comes out, I guess I'd like to talk to them about what they're doing over these last few hard springs and winters of increasing the pheasant populations, and maybe have some discussion on that. The numbers are better this year. I'm actually seeing some birds out there, but this is the first year in probably 5. So.
Yeah, no, we're eager to get pheasant hunters in the state, and I think we're all hoping to have a really good year, and at least anecdotally, it looks like we will. So,
okay.
Some good news on the pheasant front.
Yeah, seeing a few anyway.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, John.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. Your feedback is really important. Anybody else on the call have any experience working with our staff on wildlife damage management, or had wildlife damage in the past, but would like to share? Yes, I got somebody coming up now. Hope I lost you. Anybody else on the call like to share any experiences or any issues they've had with wildlife damage?
Say, Arden, just to maybe jump in here for a minute, and Mitch Richter, I know you're on, and not to put you on the spot, but you know, the organization that you work for, it's got several tens of thousands of producers. I'm sure you talk to those folks regularly. Got any feedback that you can share from your constituents that you've talked about these programs or issues that come to mind?
Well, you know, thanks. It's kind of a, you know, I represent South Dakota Farmers Union, and it's kind of a mixed bag. You know, at our annual convention every year, wildlife damage control is always sort of an issue. But it seems to be, you know, different parts of the state. If you have a lot of wildlife congregated in one spot, you know, a couple winters ago, there were, you know, large deer herds in several places that I know you guys worked on with landowners. And so generally, I think they're very positive in the working relationship with game fish and parks. But they're always looking to see, you know, how the programs change, and that's kind of why I'm here yesterday and today, is to see what you're up to, so I can kind of report back. We can get information out to those folks. A lot of it, I think, sometimes is misinformation. You know, they heard this or read it someplace, and maybe it's not quite accurate, and that kind of tends to get blown out of proportion. And I try to bring them back to center and say, you know, let's work with Game Fish and Parks on these things, and let's make sure we have accurate information. So yeah, it's kind of a mixed bag generally, but I think the bigger issues are generally where you have more wildlife congregated. So
Thanks, Mitch. And, you know, in regards to the misinformation, you know, sometimes it's helpful if you have a meeting, or whether it's a board meeting or a convention or something, if it works for you to have Keith or someone on as a speaker, bring some information on our program, might be helpful for us to do that as well, if that would be something that would work.
Sure. Yep. I think we're going to have it's probably going to be a Zoom convention this fall. We haven't totally decided that yet, I don't think, but we're always looking for people to come and talk to. So that'll be great.
Thank you. Anybody else out there have any comments or questions? Tom, looks like you're ready to speak up here, so I'm going to put you on. What do you have to add?
Again, I just want to thank everybody for being on the call today. And, you know, I think we do want to hear from you, and there's a lot of things going on, and Mitch, really appreciate the opportunities for us to be engaged with your organization, and we would more than welcome the opportunities to visit with those folks. And, you know, there's a lot of discussion that occurs on these particular programs and issues that arise out there. And I think you're right. Sometimes there's either a lack of information or some misinformation, and we're always welcome and eager and ready to have those conversations with you and your folks and members. And please include us wherever we can. And I know you mentioned yesterday in the call as well that your willingness to share information and get the word out there. And we look forward to working with you and taking advantage of those opportunities as well.
Yeah, that sounds good. You bet.
Thanks, Tom.
Arden?
Yes. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Paul. Yeah.
I'd have a question.
ahead.
Several years ago, the department was running a landowner list where depredation was a problem, and then they would match up in that area with local hunters to come out and harvest those animals that were causing the problem, and were able to put hunter and landowner together. Is that still going on? And when that was running, what was the success rate of that program?
Thanks for your question, Paul. I think Keith is ready to respond to that, and could probably talk a little bit about what we've done in the past, and then also maybe about some of our depredation hunts, our pool hunts, and things like that.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Paul. A couple of things, I guess. I think what you're referring to is what we call our volunteer hunter program, which is a spot on our website where individuals that have a deer tag, for example, in a certain area can go ahead and hop on, register, provide their personal information. And then hopefully, you know, landowners that feel that they have an overabundance of deer will reach out to those folks. We've had that a long time over the years for a lot of different species, from coyotes to Canada geese to deer. And we've discontinued some of those programs just because actually through surveys, we weren't ever really getting landowners to contact those people. And, you know, right, understandably so. You know, a lot of times it's hard for a producer to hop on some website, look at a list of folks, and then call some guy out of the blue and ask him and invite him to come out to his property and, you know, tromp around with a high power. So I certainly understand that. But I can say that, you know, specifically for deer, our agency has used that contact list, and we've contacted some of those hunters and then put them in contact with landowners that we know have some problems. So I would view that as a success, maybe not the landowners directly reaching out to hunters, but our agency getting people on from that list, putting them in contact with landowners. So that's worked well. The other thing that we do have is we do have people where they can hop on our website and register for free for depredation hunts. And that's kind of dependent upon certain weather situations. But if we have a severe winter weather and we have an area where the landowner and our staff feel a depredation hunt would help the situation, we'll go ahead and take that list, randomize it, and then we contact individuals. Say there were 30 tags in Falk County, we'll go ahead and contact you know, the people on the list and put those folks directly in contact with that landowner, provide them with a tag or two, and that program's been really successful. So hopefully that answers your question, Paul.
It does. Thanks. The suggestion I would have, other states have it where it isn't the landowner making the contact with the hunter, it's the other way around. A landowner list of phone numbers or email addresses now would be available to hunters looking for a way to fill a tag, particularly on antlerless animals, and then be able to, for the hunter then to reach out to a landowner in an area that they have a tag available and make the connection. A lot of people have quit hunting now because no access to anywhere what they feel they can get a quality experience. This might develop some landowner-hunter relationships that can go for years and be a win-win.
Nope, that's a good suggestion, Paul, and something that we can kick around and talk about for certain, so thank you.
Thank you, Paul. I appreciate that. Anybody else out there have any questions? Emily, maybe you could go back to that slide, that last slide that we had again. We can refresh that. All right, we've heard a little bit. I don't know how many producers we have on here today. We don't have a lot of people on the call, but everybody's input is really important. And whether you're a producer or not, we sure appreciate your comments and your questions. And we have shared a little bit on what wildlife damage management services you've had in the past. you know, and I don't know if the next step on there, the next item is help our department determine program goals. And how can we modify current programs and services to meet the needs of the landowners and producers? What services are working well? What areas could we use improvement? We've heard a little bit of that already. I'm just going to throw it out there again for opportunity for folks to weigh in to see if there's anything specifically to modifications to our programs and services. Once again, for some of you folks that are on the telephone, you may have to go to *6 on your telephone if you'd like to speak, to unmute yourself. I think one of the phone lines right now is open. If that person wanted to speak, the digits end in 4530. The other two that are on there, 1582 and 1040, are muted right now too. So if you want to speak, we'd sure like to hear from you. Okay, thank you, Brian. And then, you know, yes.
Our
Go ahead.
listeners, to
Go ahead,
everybody.
Tom.
Well, I think what we would also offer up to you, you know, as you look at the screen here, we're asking about our current program and services and, you know, are they working well and how are they used? You know, we would also offer up, do you have any ideas of something new we should be doing that we're not currently doing, or some type of program or service that we currently don't offer and that we should be? And so please don't focus or think only about the things that we currently have available to folks. We'd certainly be open to discussion and learn more about new ideas or new approaches if that is something that's out there as well. So we would encourage that type of information sharing also.
Thank you for that clarification, Tom. I should have mentioned that. That's, yes, for sure.
Arden,
Yes.
what is, in South Dakota, is it still that you cannot get a deer tag in more than one county?
No, that's, it depends on the unit that you're in, but I'll probably let Kevin go over that because we did some alteration on some of our process for putting in for licenses the last couple of years. So Kevin, if you don't mind, take the lead on that one.
Yeah, sure. No, there has been a few subtle changes, not necessarily so much in the front end, but more on the draws 2, 3, 4, and 5. And at the end of the day, as a landowner, you still have the abilities to always obtain the landowner-owned land license, half price. It's over the counter. It's a guaranteed license. It just requires you to hunt on your own land. And that license, you know, if you do have land in 2 counties and you're on your own land, it's still valid. So the other license, though, the landowner preference, you know, that's where you have to actually apply for, in your case, the West River deer season. And that would only be then for that unit, Todd County. So there are some unique situations there, but we also have statewide seasons, archery being one of those, muzzleloader, youth. So there's antlerless opportunities where those licenses are, and not just antlerless, archery is also antlered, but those opportunities are statewide in some situations. So it depends on the tag type, depends on the license type. You know, we do have quite a few different delineations of deer units and seasons within South Dakota. It's not overly simplistic, and I'll be the first to admit that. There's a East River deer, a West River deer, a Black Hills deer, a muzzleloader deer, a Custer State Park deer, and a refuge deer, and that's just our firearm seasons. Let alone then we do have our archery seasons and then youth. So between those 8 different seasons, it is dependent upon what type of license you purchase, if it is valid in 1 or more counties.
On the muzzle loader versus rifle, can you only have 1 buck tag, or can you still get a buck in each one of them?
So you can get a buck tag in each one. If you draw, let's say, a West River Todd County buck tag, that's going to be a separate season than the muzzleloader season. The muzzleloader buck tag's pretty hard to draw. There's 1,000 of those licenses that are at the statewide level. You know, it takes about 5-6 years of preference to typically draw one of those. And so, you know, you'll draw it. You can draw both at the same time, but it's not going to happen very often just because of the demand for those licenses. So right now, the structure of the first draw when it comes to firearm is you can have 2 of the 6 firearm deer seasons. That's what you can apply for, and that's what you can obtain in that first draw. Before, obviously, you could apply for all 6. And the reason that was changed is we're trying to get more hunters in the field more often. So instead of somebody having 4 or 5 buck tags in the first draw, we're trying to get those 4 or 5 buck tags distributed to more hunters in that first draw. So we did get about 1,000 more hunters in the field last year after that change was made, and we're eager to see what 2020 numbers look like.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, John. Any other questions or comments? Emily, if you would mind putting that slide up one more time, I'll make sure that we touch well on the customer service, the measuring of the customer service. I think we're probably getting to the point where we've gone through most of this already, but you know, one of the things that we're working on is that last item there is we want to make sure that we have excellent customer service. That's what we strive for, is excellent customer service in all of our programs, and wildlife damage management is no different. And if you have participated in this program in the past or would participate in the future, you know, what would satisfaction look like to you? Is it, you know, number of critters taken? Is it timely response? Is it follow-up? What does that look like to you? And if you could weigh in a little bit on that, we sure would appreciate it. John, I hate to keep calling on you, but you've been, you know, real quick to respond and provide input. So if you have any comments as far as what your satisfaction has been with our program in the past and what it would take for us to get an excellent rating on your customer service, that would be helpful.
Well, that's kind of $1 million question. You know, some days when nothing's going wrong, you're right at the top of the list. You know, I guess, you know, it seems like in Tripp County, one of the problems that we've had in Tripp County is keeping a game officer. And, you know, some guys think that's okay, and some guys, you know, sometimes it creates a problem, you know. So I guess out here, I've always had pretty good relationships. You know, we see even this year, you know, you see a few deer around that are acting kind of odd, and you know, I've usually, if I can't get a hold, don't know somebody in winter, I call the Chamberlain office or the Pier office to find out if we got a game officer, if I think something needs put down out here, and they just usually give me the okay to put a deer down if I think it's acting sick or something out here. So, you know, I guess keeping the game officers, you know, within our area, I think I don't know that it's caused any problems, but you know, if nothing else, it's always a deterrent for maybe some of those that might press the boundaries, I guess, or over exceed. You know, that I think you guys spend a lot of time on the river, you know, watching the fishery and what's going on there. And, you know, I don't know if it's as equally distributed, you know, time wise or not. You know, I don't have the time to follow you guys and make sure you're doing your job. So if you run up behind me, then I'll assume you're doing your job. But, I guess, one of the problems that I got out here and my neighbor and I have been working on it, all of us kind of around here, is a prairie dog problem. And I don't really pertain to deer, but you want to talk about depredation. There's some dang depredation there.
Yeah, that does. We are interested in that. We do have a program. So tell us a little bit about what's going on and what you need to get a good response.
Well, on my land, I've hit them with both pellets, and then we're doing another program to get some control on them in the field right west of my house. I probably got about probably a 90% or better kill on them, but I just, it's the time to keep up with that 5 or 10% that's still out there, that while trying to get everything else done, that is kind of the problem. And just over by my father-in-law's place, I haven't got to hit that yet, and it's kind of I've let some people come in and hunt and stuff, but it's a problem. I got about a 40-acre area that's kind of overrun with them. So, I checked with you guys to see if there's an assistance deal where somebody could come out and help assist to get rid of them or not. I guess I don't know that, but if that's probably an area within I know within our 5-mile radius or better that there's a kind of a serious prairie dog problem, and people are working on getting rid of them, but along with everything else, it does run into a timely issue of being able to get everything done, plus keep them within control.
John, thank you for that. I think Keith will jump in and talk a little bit more about our prairie dog control program in the state. And I don't know if this fits for your operation, but Keith, can you provide some more details on that?
Sure, Arden. And thanks, John, for that question too. Here in South Dakota, prairie dogs have a long history, as you probably well know, and a lot of controversy surrounding those. And in 2005, our agency worked with a lot of the legislators as well as the Department of Ag, and implemented the 2005 Blacktail Prairie Dog Management Plan. And within that plan, it really states and points out what areas of responsibility each agency has and in what types of situations. And here in South Dakota, our agency certainly will provide direct control of prairie dogs that have encroached onto private property from some type of adjacent public land. So if you had a school section or a game production area or some type of public land that prairie dogs are on, they're encroaching onto your property, creating a hardship, we'll certainly come in there and control those areas so it doesn't impact landowners. Sounds like in your situation, maybe those prairie dogs, are on your property naturally, or perhaps they came in from a neighbor. If it's a neighborly dispute, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I would guess, I haven't found any with any ID on them. So, I think they're just coming across the Mexican border or something, so they may be here illegally, but I'm assuming because of the problem right in this area, we got school lands a couple miles away, and to my knowledge, there may be some to the northeast of us, but I don't know that for a fact because I haven't been up there. But I would say they come just from local neighbors within a 2-mile area, probably.
Yeah, and that's not uncommon. I mean, prairie dogs have been documented, especially in dry times of the year, to move over 5 miles. So, I mean, they can certainly move a great distance. And, I can't speak for the School and Public Lands Office and the commissioner there. I mean, they've always been really great to work with our agency. If we have a landowner that, has some property next to school and public land, the School and Public Land Agency has always stepped up to the plate and done the control on their property at the same time that we're trying to control on those nearby areas. But those private land to private land disputes are always a little bit more difficult. If there's any saving grace, I mean, producers can get the poison and the pre-brait directly from the Department of Agriculture at a real reduced cost. There's also prairie dog control contractors out there, some down in your area that, can come into a certain area and do that work for folks from, it depends on how many acres you have and what's exactly there, but anywhere from 10 to 25 bucks an acre. So there are some options out there for producers that just have prairie dogs on their property for one reason or another, or from a neighbor.
Right. I've used some of those private applicators once or twice. My neighbor and I did, and then this year we kind of took care of it ourselves and went out there and doctored the holes up. So it's just mostly for landowners. I think just a time constraint issue that sometimes it don't take long for it to get away from a person the way those little buggers repopulate. So.
Thank you, John.
You're welcome. I'm going to sign off now, guys. Thanks for having this. And I think this Zoom deal is a real positive way to get a lot more people into your meetings, because, I see the emails come across, and it's just really tough I get to appear way too often for legislature stuff that I don't like either. So but I think this is an awesome way to handle some of your meetings and get out to the public. So thank you.
Well, thank you for your input. That was very valuable, and that was a question that I was going to ask there at the end too, whether folks on the call felt that this was productive and a valuable way to interact with folks, with our producers.
Yeah, thanks, John, for your time. Sure appreciate it. It's great to have you on the call.
Yep, thank you.
Anything from anybody else out there either somebody who hasn't spoken yet or somebody who wants to add any more comments? I think we had somebody join by phone here recently. If you'd like to add any comments or have any questions, feel free to unmute your phone. You may have to go *6 or tap your phone in order to give that option, but you're not required to, but if you'd like to provide some input, we sure would like you to share. Hearing none at this time right now, and feel free to join in, raise your hand if you have any other questions or comments. Kevin, do you have any additional comments that you would like to make at this time? Start with you.
No, I don't, Arden. I think we had a good conversation here. I mean, some of the things, we just really are trying to gauge, how we can measure success of this program. Is it through a report card? Is it through satisfaction surveys? Those types of things. And I think we heard from most folks on the line. But if there's other folks out there, it'd be great if you had anything to add to the conversation pertaining to those things. I mean, we can't stress enough. We want to make sure the department's providing excellent customer service and meeting the needs of the producers out there. So yeah, that would be all I have, Arden. If there's other comments, thoughts that folks don't want to share right now, we're always more than willing to receive private phone calls, emails, whatever that might be. And we're always happy to communicate and keep those communication lines open. That's very important. So just want to throw that out there as well. And yeah, we definitely will plan to have more of these calls so we can keep those communication lines open.
Thank you. Thank you, Kevin. Any responses from those on the call to Kevin's calls or to his comments? Tom, do you have anything to add?
No, again, I just thank everybody for taking the time today. And I was going to mention the same thing Kevin did is, every year when we evaluate this program, we're trying to determine how well we're doing or what we can do better or what we can do differently. And, we have used surveys in the past to reach out to people, and that's something that we're looking at continuing to do more, maybe on a more frequent basis, maybe on an annual basis, in particular those landowners, producers that we do actually provide assistance or programs in a given year. We have also looked at the concept that Kevin just mentioned too, a report card that, while we're out there in the field and we worked with you on, regardless of the situation, maybe hand you at that moment in time an actual report card or response card that you would quickly fill out and either return it to our staff or maybe even just drop in the mailbox and mail to us. And again, we're just trying to gauge how we're doing and what we can do better. And everybody's perspective on how satisfied they are is going to vary based on the circumstances, the situation, the severity, and what we had available. And so we totally understand that, but we really want to hear back from folks. And so we're looking at some of those options. So I guess I would offer up, anybody on the phone has any real issues or heartburn with surveys or report cards like that, we'd certainly like to hear about it, because that's certainly a direction that we're looking at implementing at a higher level, just to better understand how we're doing.
Thanks, Tom. Any responses for Tom? I got Paul's chat comment that thought the Zoom meeting was a good venue for doing that. Appreciate that, Paul. One thing I want to leave us with today is that we value your input, and we really appreciate your comments that you provide us either today or in the future. You can reach out to us. I'd give you Keith Fisk's phone number. That's 605-773-7595. Once again, he's our program administrator for the Wildlife Damage Management Program. And also my number is 605-359-0654. And we can get the information to the proper people. If there's a question that, myself or Keith can't answer, if it's something that's not specific to this program, we'll get you to the right person, and we'll get follow-up that's needed for you to get your answer. So really want to say thank you all for participating today, and appreciate you taking the time to be on this call. So if there's no other comments, give one last chance for anybody to comment. Otherwise, we will probably be doing some more of this in the future. I don't see any other comments, so thank you all for participating. Take care.
Yes, buddy. Thanks a lot. We'll see you now.
Hey, Arden, I was just going to hang out for a second in case somebody from Western South Dakota got their time zones mixed up.
Oh, yeah, good. Yep, that sounds good. I was kind of waiting to make sure everybody got off here off the call before, but yeah, that could be didn't think about that.
Yeah, it's a good call. I was also just catching up on a few things that were on the chat just to make sure we got those last couple of comments that came in.
Yeah, thanks, Farron. I was thinking the same thing. Wanted to at least say thanks to those people that weighed in.
Yeah.
Laura Lee responded after Paul and just said thank you.
That's awesome.
I appreciate your interest in wanting to provide excellent service. And then Kim Lee, which I don't know if there's any relation. Oops. we are new ranch owners in Harding County, and we're learning about the depredation on our ranch. This meeting was very helpful to get us started, and we will contact you with any questions that arise. So,
Yay.
yeah.
Good. Good.
I wish there was emails, you know, just to be
Yep.
able to then follow up.
Yep. Yeah, it's hard when you don't have a sign-in sheet. I mean, that's one
Yeah.
of those things to be able to connect back with folks. Yeah.
That's, you know, and I don't, Farron, maybe we think about this a little bit more in terms of
Okay.
how because that is typically a best practice that we would do for these in-person meetings. I mean, we did it. Oh, now we have somebody waiting to get in. Do we want to admit anybody right now, Arden?
I think because we're done, I think we should just, we should get